Hey, welcome to the Kinda Sleepy podcast. I'm your host, Knowledge. And Natty is doing the Mother's Day thing today with his family. And also, shout out to him because it was his daughter's birthday this week. And so he was doing the super dad thing. And then Miss EP is doing her Mother's Day thing as well, with her and her princess. And I want to give a shout out to my mom because, it is Mother's Day. We're recording a little bit late this week. And so you'll catch this at the beginning of next week, probably. But well, really tomorrow, which begins a new week. So happy Monday when you hear this. So I still got a heavy hitter because this is a heavy episode. He's been on the show before. He's a friend of the show. B Wolf, what's happening, baby?
Yo, what up, bro?
Glad to have you on the show, man. You got any Mother's Day shout outs?
As always, man, I want to just shout out all the moms that's doing their thing. I understand there's a lot of sacrifice, a lot of patience that come into, raising kids. It's not just your biological mom, but the communal mom, the spiritual mom. Everybody who's out here, looking after somebody else's kids. You know what I'm saying? It's it's constantly say, it takes a village to raise us. So definitely shout out to those moms who are out there doing their thing, not only with their kid, but with other people's kids as well.
That's what's up, man. That's what's up. So last week on the episode on the show, we talked about we talked a little bit about just pretty much existing while black. I don't know if you caught last week's episode, but this week is kind of all about that. And I don't know, like the thing is, people, it's starting to annoy me when folks are like, "Oh, the media is just trying to keep us separated and race baiting." No, because these things that the media is reporting on, if they weren't happening, they'd have nothing to report on. And I guarantee you, every single black person for the most part, I'm not gonna say every single black person, I'm gonna say probably a strong 80% plus black people that have had these situations where we've had to justify our very existence or right to be somewhere. And so this week's episode is really about three things. We're going to talk about three things on this episode. We're going to talk about black people and our right to exist in certain spaces. You got me on speakerphone? I hear an echo. Oh, yeah, that echo is coming back through real bad, that feedback. But also, we got to talk about Dear White People. Have you seen the whole thing? Have you seen the whole season?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we got to talk about Dear White People. But then we also got to talk about Donald Glover, a.k.a. Childish Gambino's This Is America. So since you're the guest, I'm going to let you choose where we're going to jump in first because I think the existing while black topic is going to be really big. So I want to kind of get to Childish Gambino and Dear White People maybe first. But it's up to you, man. Where you want to start off at, brother?
Hey man, I'm gonna follow your lead, man. So let's hold on to that existing while black piece.
Okay.
For a little bit.
Okay. So let's start off with Donald Glover. For those of you that haven't seen it, This Is America is his new song. He does Atlanta, the show Atlanta. He's in the new Star Wars offshoot pick about Billy D. Williams' old character Lando Calrissian. He was a writer for The Office. He recently did Saturday Night Live. I mean, he's all over the place doing a whole bunch of stuff, but he's also a rapper that goes by the name of Childish Gambino. I kid you not, I saw at least 4 or 5 people this week on Facebook say that they did not know that Childish Gambino and Donald Glover were the same person.
When you're that talented, I'm telling you, like he can. I mean, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, I just tilt hat to the brother's talent.
Yeah, man. He's able to maneuver in a lot of different spaces. And the thing is about it, like but he's always had kind of a devil may care, nonchalant consciousness about himself that kind of got brought to the forefront, specifically with this effort that he put out, This Is America, and there was so much symbolism in it. I want to get your initial thoughts on that. What'd you think up first?
Man, I watched it. You know what? I watched it 3 different times in 3 different ways in order to fully to even touch the surface of what he was putting out. Because when I saw it, just watching, I was like, man, this guy is just phenomenal artistic talent. And I mean, it wasn't just a music video. It was actually art,
Right.
and he was making statements all over the place. So the first time I watched it, just as is. The second time I watched it on mute and just sat and just looked at the visual elements. And then the third time I watched it by just like not focusing on Donald Glover, just focusing strictly on the background. And you got something from it each and every time. So I thought, honestly, this was brilliantly done.
Right.
And it was timely too, considering, when you take one of our most iconic figures, and he uses his platform to, in a lot of ways, mitigate the impact of slavery by blaming the slaves, like victim blaming the slaves themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this was, Donald Glover's reminder and almost educational piece to let you know, like, man, this is the system. This is America. This is what America's always done, and not just, putting the onus on us as Black people and say it's our fault. So definitely love it.
Now there was I do one thing I do. I've always been a big hip hop fan, huge fan of all various types of hip hop. And you just brought something up that I tend to do with not only albums but also certain music videos. I don't do this with every music video, but I do it with certain music videos, and this one was no exception. I watched it or listened to it 3 times. The first time I listened to it just to see how I feel about it, to emotionally break down whether I like it or not. And then the second time I started listening for content. And then the third time I do a deeper dive based on that second examination that I did. And so I do that for, hip hop albums and music videos as well. And what I was impressed by with this one specifically was the layers. He clearly thought out a whole bunch of this stuff. I mean, I hate to even bring her up because I have okay. So quick sidebar. Azalea Banks, basically, who's known more for dragging people than she is for her music at this point, basically went in on Cardi B and said that Cardi B was a caricature of black women, and she really just got real nasty with her. Cardi's pregnant. Cardi out here living her best life, minding her own business, man. She don't control what people like and what people don't like and what people push and what people don't push. So to drag her for just, doing the music that she was already doing, you don't get no points for that for me. You know what I'm saying? That girl, she's just doing her thing. And so I was I thought about what she said though. And then I went back and watched This Is America again before, this episode. And that kind of brought together all those memes I saw with the Jim Crow caricatures of folks like the Sambo character, the nigger Jim, and all those various things that you saw. If you haven't seen Ethnic Notions, for my listeners out there, go watch Ethnic Notions. It'll teach you about these various archetypes that Black people have been boxed in, stereotypes that Black people have been boxed in over centuries in terms of our media representation. But when he did the funny face, the first thing I thought was Uncle Ruckus. And while it was very similar to Uncle Ruckus, when people put that old racist advertisement up next to it, that let me know, okay, so Uncle Ruckus was taken from this, which then Childish Gambino uses now, today. And Boondocks isn't even that far back in our collective understanding and in our collective memory as far as Black art has been concerned. And so then when he did the raising his arms up in the champion's pose to look like the Richard Pryor thing, that's a very common thing that you see, very common theme that you see throughout history of little Black children and even Black men having their arms in their champion pose, and it's almost like a form of exploitation for us. It's a mockery of the strength that they're supposed to possess. And then when people made the joke about how he was standing, but then when you saw it juxtaposed against another racist advertisement, you completely understood the return of Jim Crow and the return of these negative stereotypes that we've been boxed into for generations now. We're looking at new. I bring up what was the movie? The the New Millennium Minstrel Show. Had Savion Glover in and Tommy Davidson. Bamboozle.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're watching right now, and I've said this. I people always thought I was crazy like 10, 15 years ago. I said we're actually walking into minstrelsy right now, and I said this about 15 years ago, and people thought I was crazy. But now we're actually seeing it come to play. But another thing people didn't notice, and somebody who paid way more attention than me and had a better historical framework for it, examined the pants that he was wearing throughout the video. Mm-hmm. And that was the pants from an old Confederate soldier.
Yes.
The old Confederate pants. And then we talked about, the 9 choir members and how that was Mother Emanuel right there in Charleston.
Mm-hmm.
And how every time he handed off a gun, he handed it off to a child. Another thing that I don't think people really paid attention to is that the dance routines when they had the kids in the in their school uniforms, there was a video that went viral. I don't know if it was last year or the year before, of African children in those same exact uniforms doing a lot of those same exact dance moves. And so even that shows how we see our own heritage sometimes more as entertainment as opposed to edification.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not soul food to us. We're constantly being used for our ability to entertain and not for our ability to educate or edify. And it's just so many various ways you can look at it, read it. And I think a lot of it he left open to interpretation because that was the nature of the entire song in and of itself. The title itself, This Is America, is vague. So what are you saying is America? I mean, we saw the police car following the pale horse, which represents death,
Mm-hmm.
and we see all this stuff. The SZA cameo, when I watched the third time, tripped me out,
Mm-hmm.
So we see all these things, and I'm just like, whoa, okay, I mean, it was probably one of the best visuals I've seen for any song, in terms of layering and artisanship, artistic expression and all that. I'm still trying to, what I'm waiting on? I'm waiting for, we saw the Lemonade syllabus after Beyonce dropped Lemonade. I'm waiting for the This Is America syllabus. That's what I'm waiting on. Mm-hmm. I want to see that. Can you make that happen for me?
Man, you know what? I may just do that.
You got to make that happen, bro. You got to make that happen.
But you're talking about the symbolism. I mean, it's still so much to unpack. Like I had to go back and look. Man, I saw chickens running around in the background. And I was like, what? So I got to go back and research that. And I've heard talks, and I was talking to some historians and about what his character is supposed to represent, like the original Jim Crow. Another thing that I noticed is how, in every instance in which like a gun was shot and used to kill somebody, not only was it handed to a kid, but it was like handled with care.
Right.
So versus the brutal way in which we're destroyed, but guns are handled with care. Just the juxtaposition against that. Him intentionally looking like a savage in the way that he positioned himself, not just in the poses, but with the roughness of his beard and the fro and everything. Yeah, the looks on people's faces, and the minstrel show of how, like, even in It's America, we're so concerned with the entertainment that we don't see the chaos that's going on in the background, and it's such a distraction. That's one of the reasons why I was like, and I got that, and I was like, you know what? Let me watch this without focusing on Donald Glover, because there's too much going on in the background. I need to pay attention to this. And then when I saw it, I got it. I was like, you know what? He's really making this point that, this is America. This is all this chaos. This is everything that's going on. Like just all the violence, all the craziness. And here I am distracting you with these with the dances and with the smiling, and basically like you said, the new age minstrel. So like I'm jigging right here in front of you. People are focused on the dance moves, and the kids are like doing all the latest dance crazy. and you're like, dang, that's deep. I love how it points out the hypocrisy of what we represent as a nation. And making a statement about gun violence, but also making a statement over, like, the irony of all of this. This is America. Has always been over bodies, specifically black bodies. So all of this is going on over black bodies.
Did you see the bodies dropping in the background?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's America. Like, over the violence against black bodies, the dragging off of black bodies, the killing of black bodies, the exploitation of black bodies. And even as he's moving along, as you're looking up, you see the kids when he's like, the cell phone's a tool, and it's us recording again the denigration of black bodies. And this is all a part of what America is, especially now in this whole fight and this push on gun violence. So, yeah, man, it's still, and I'm still unpacking this, because I'm one of those people, like, I have to watch it, then sit and reflect, and then go back and watch it again. Yeah, so.
Yeah, man, it's a lot, man, and I'm probably gonna watch it 3 or 4 more times. And I'm doing a little bit of research and looking here, and somebody posted on Twitter that one of the more interesting things about the song itself is that credited with some of the people that are credited for the background vocals. You got Quavo from the Migos. You got 21 Savage, Young Thug, Slim Jimmy, and Block Boy JB. Now, knowing Donald Glover and knowing his love for Atlanta hip hop, knowing, like, after he gave the Migos a cosign, what was that, on the Grammys? After he gave them a cosign on the Grammys, that's when the Migos really, really took off into the stratosphere.
Yes.
And so, knowing these ad libs, or whoever did these background vocals are being used as ad libs, and given the message of the song, I don't think his intent is to take a shot at these mumble rappers or these particular artists or anything like that, because they're getting a check off of it. But
yes,
what that does make me think is that, I've always thought that 21 Savage was probably a little bit smarter than people gave him credit for.
Yeah.
He's one of those dudes that from your old neighborhood that always had a real quick mind, but maybe wasn't as articulate as everybody else. But yes. 21 is not I don't think he's a dumb guy. I just think he's kind of trapped in he is who his environment made him. And so that's what I think about him. And so here's my question to you. Do you think that maybe these particular 5 people, considering the fact that they gave him the right to use their vocals or whatever, do you think that maybe they understand how they're being used to a certain degree as a part of this new millennium minstrel show?
I think that they don't understand, not because they were tricked, but I think in the sense that they don't understand because there's a growing apathy among us when it comes to this. So, I want to point something else out to you, and it may blow your mind or not. And I read a lot, right? Mm-hmm. So, if you go back and look at the video, Donald Glover's wearing yellow shoes, and I'm gonna tell you what, like, and this is brilliant. It goes back to, and the reason he's doing it because it goes back to his book called The Visit. It's like a Swiss author wrote it, and I forgot the guy's name. I want to say it's Durmont or something like that. But in the book, there's a guy, he gets this woman pregnant, and he leaves her. And out of shame, she leaves town and then comes to America, right? Mm-hmm. And so as she goes, so years later, she comes back to the town to get revenge on the man who got her pregnant, right? So she tries to buy everyone into, like, secretly killing the guy. So everybody neglect to do it. They don't do the job. They just take her money. So in the book, this metaphor as like a secret sign for those people who, like, sold their soul. they get to wear yellow shoes. So basically, everyone who's ever surrendered to like the offering of like big fast money wears yellow shoes.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So him and dancing and celebrating, and the thing is, like I was wondering, like, yo, he's doing these latest dance crazes, and then like he's got these bright yellow shoes, and I'm looking at this and I start reflecting. I said, you know what? He's pointing at all these artists who are selling their souls for this fast money,
Or is he
and
also
it's
pointing at himself?
yeah, himself too. And again, it's the hypocrisy of all of us in being that this is America, and we're nothing more but a distraction
That's real.
from the reality that's going on around us that we should be concerned about.
Now here's another thing that I just picked up. I just saw this that some folks didn't realize. So there's a moment in the video where he's dancing with the school kids, and then you hear a gunshot, then you hear silence.
Yes.
The silence goes on for 17 seconds, and then he, lights up his joint or whatever. Now, the 17 seconds of silence ends at 4:20 when he lights a joint. But the 17 seconds of silence is also what the students observed on their walkouts for the 17 victims of the Parkland shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And they walked out on 4:20.
Yeah.
And so here's my thing. You got to be a brilliant individual to have all these various pieces and layers in such a short artistic piece of expression. Like that's I gotta say it, man. He's brilliant as far as I'm concerned. He's probably one of the more brilliant creatives of our time at this point.
Yes, absolutely.
I hate the fact that a lot of what the beauty of this was got overshadowed by the fact that some people were salty about him having a white girlfriend or whatever. That killed me. Yeah.
And you know what? The thing about that is that, again, it points to just this hypocrisy in us. And I had a question with a female friend about this, and I asked her, I was like, why do Black women feel the need to be a burden bearer for the decisions that Black men make when it comes to dating? If a man chooses, he chooses. I mean, that says nothing about the woman. That doesn't mean that every time a Black man chooses a white woman, then that means that he's neglecting her, or he ain't ish, or that Black men can't be woke and date and date outside their race.
Right.
Because I love sisters. I'm always date sisters, but as I get older, I realize that certain things do play heavy, like my spirituality and culture. And because of culture, that's why I don't date outside my race. So for some people, other things could weigh heavier on the lens of like forming true connectedness. I know they try to make this whole thing as a blurred attack, which I think has some validity, but truth be told, I think it's just a bit of a coincidence, because when you talk about this stuff, I talk about when they say blurred, I was thinking about, maybe they're just pointing out the fact that this dude was a late bloomer, because when he was younger, nobody was checking for this dude. Right. But when he blows up, now you look at him differently. I mean, but that's nothing new. But yeah, I just think that again, I think that's just one of those things that where we become so hypocritical as a society, and we become so divided as a race, that's going to just be a part of the rhetoric no matter where we go at this point, because there's just a growing sense of distrust in this between Black men and Black women, and it comes from pain that we haven't dealt with, pain of abandonment, pain of just betrayal.
Right.
Like I was talking, I got into an argument with a bro over this, because he's complaining about R. Kelly being removed from Spotify. I said, I find it interesting that you're talking about the downfall of the Black race because Spotify is attacking this Black man. I said, but you don't realize that this Black man was victimizing Black women and Black girls.
Right.
He's victimizing our village. And he's gotten off, and we're not holding him accountable. And he was like, "It's no different than Cosby." I said, "No, it is different from Cosby, because Cosby was doing it to black women back in the day, allegedly, but what got Cosby caught up was that when he was doing it to white women, and then a white lesbian woman. Now the politics of that comes into play. So they're gonna protect their own. They're gonna come after. They're gonna support. So it's us who are not standing for black women, and black women see this, because like, again, black women are pointing out how they take it to the polls and they push Roy Moore back.
Right.
They go to the streets. They march for the deaths of us. But when a sister gets killed, we start talking about her black attitude might have been the reason that caused the cop to snap.
Yo, that made me so mad, dog. Like, I'm not gonna even lie. That really had me heated. People saying that.
But that cultural, that betrayal, and then you see these images, and I try to tell people, be careful, because we don't own our images. We don't own the rights to distribute and to control the content and how it comes out. It's always being pushed through a filter, and it's a filter that they control. So,
right.
You think I was crazy, and I joke about, like, every few years they'll take our most beautiful black woman, pair up with a white male co-star at the expense of a irresponsible black man, and it becomes this great love story because now he's their savior and we're left irresponsible. So these images are like going around. We talk about side chicks, it's at the behest of black women. But if you go back and you look at it, that's been going on through society. When white men do it, we don't pay attention to it. But when black women are hurt, we are the perpetrators. And there's a lot of frustration building up, and at some point in time, we got to have that real conversation about that pain that's there between us, because that's what keeps our communities divided.
Yeah,
so,
I agree with that, man.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
But yeah, man, it doesn't matter for me. Donald Glover is brilliant, and I can separate the artistry from the artist.
I can in some cases. In R. Kelly's case, no, I'm not listening to R. Kelly sing about 14-year-olds.
Oh no, but that's different,
right?
Because in that instance, what people are trying to separate is they're trying to use his talent to make him
rationalize his victimization of black girls, and I'm not cool with that.
Exactly, and your talent doesn't make you exempt from bad behavior.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, let's move on to the next topic. Since we got on interracial dating for just a second. Dear white people.
Man. My hypocritical side of me, man. I think Logan Browning is so beautiful, so I was hurt all over. But hey, I love the character growth, but she's beautiful.
So where do we even start? I'm not gonna criticize the show this week, okay? Because I have a lot of I didn't really think about the show critically the first season, but I thought about it very critically this season because I wanted to see where they were gonna go, and I was such a fan of the movie that I didn't want to really be too critical of it because I really just kind of wanted to enjoy the idea of, being in an undergraduate institution that's predominantly white and you being able to express yourself in such a way that it not only brings attention to the issues surrounding the black community, but also it forces white people to look at these issues from a place of an uncomfortable feeling. Because I've always said that the only way that anything changes is when white people feel uncomfortable. And so that's really what I was looking at as far as this was concerned.
Okay.
But, so what? You are in the field of higher education administration.
Yeah.
So as an administrator, from an administrative standpoint, what did you think about this new season, and how accurately sometimes does it depict the issues that you see on college campuses? I mean, I know we both went to PWIs. And we went to PWIs where, they pretty much let you know they ain't really want you around when they when it was time to let you know. So given your experience at the PWI, much like mine, and now from an administrative standpoint, what did you think about it from that aspect?
I think I honestly like the series better than I like the movie. Because it was too many gaps for me in the movie. But the series, one thing you got to keep in mind is that what we're seeing in the series isn't speaking to our generation. It's speaking to their generation. And one of the major themes that you're seeing that's prevalent throughout the first season and the second season is how you have these black kids at an Ivy League institution who some of them let me put it like this. They're still having an identity crisis, almost each and every individual. And they love the black identity, but they are disconnected from, and they don't understand the cultural nuances of this black identity. So they talk about marching, they're talking about, their identity in being black and being woke only in response to negativity. But when there's nothing dramatic happening in the background, Sam goes on and she lives her life uninterrupted, doing something else that doesn't resemble her identity. Like, she still struggles with being biracial. So, right. and keep in mind, like, when you're watching the show, before she took on her identity, she was just a happy biracial kid who wasn't woke, who was trying to just fit in, who was trying to get this Ivy League going, but she had her heart broken. She morphed into something else. You got Troy, who comes from black privilege at its highest, up all the way down to the secret organization, and he's being groomed, but he doesn't have an identity. He's just like
his identity is wrapped up in what he's supposed to be.
Exactly, and so you have that. But one thing I'm still giving it a chance because there's a lot of character development that's happening. And season 2 is just a continuation of more character development. We're just starting now to see the vulnerability of it. But going back to this fantasy of blackness, you saw the last episode. I was so mad at the last episode because I wanted another episode to unpack what I just saw. This idea that in plain sight, there's a secret organization of black people that start off as slaves that was secretly undermining this Ivy League institution, and this is how they've been able to thrive throughout all these years. That is like the ultimate black fantasy, that there's a secret black society that are brilliant and they're thriving at an Ivy League institution, and they're still moving in the shadows, and they're tapping black people and bringing them forth as the next generation of foot soldiers or what have you.
Yeah, that's definitely a fantasy, and I take it past fantasy to pipe dream, but that's another story. I don't want to get into that specifically, and why that both excited me and broke my heart at the same time. Yeah. I don't really want to go there. But what I was most intrigued by was, one thing about me is that I found a piece of myself in a couple of the characters. Because throughout college, all this ranting and raving that I did about society and America and Black America specifically, people thought I was freaking nuts, but I was really like, no, look, pay attention. Like, I spent a big chunk of my time thinking and examining the world around me, trying to see where I fit in. And I realized that I didn't fit in anywhere. And that's what my reality eventually became. And that's what I've accepted about myself. And so, but to see Sam talking to Sam, it was a complete and total utter, like, it was a Saul on the road to Damascus moment for me specifically. And the quote that came up, the cliche at this point that came up was, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reality that I struggle with sometimes as a communicator, even with this podcast. Just to be, and for the sake of 100% transparency, like I sometimes think about this podcast and what we aim to do in giving a voice to certain issues from a humorous take, but also admitting that we don't know everything. And we admit that sometimes being woke sucks. Like it completely sucks. And so I fear that eventually, should this podcast grow, expand, and the reach gets broader and broader and broader, I fear that it will then be weaponized as something else. And to go back to what we were talking about earlier, I fear that the podcast itself will wear the yellow shoes, much like Sam did when she was talking to the younger version of herself.
Yes.
And so the reality is that to a certain degree, to once again go back to our earlier point, this is America. We can claim to fight the good fight, but Dr. Yusuf McKnight told me something very, very, that's powerful, that stuck with me for about 15 years now, almost 15 years. He said that once you obtain a certain level of education, you are worth a certain amount of money, period. That certain amount of money is not an amount of money that you can go back home and still claim to be relatively equal to the folks that you left back there. You can now sympathize with their struggles and their day-to-day happenings, but you can no longer empathize unless you choose to get rid of that which you have undergone, and built up for yourself. And I'm paraphrasing with that. And so to a certain extent, the more experiences we have, the more advanced we get, the more education we get, we can no longer fool ourselves into believing that we're quote unquote fighting the good fight. What we're doing is trying to protect ourselves and our family. And so we have a bit of what I consider educational and career privilege when it comes comparative to those who are on a lower social or socioeconomic strata than us. Now, that being said, I look at the kids in Dear White People, and by virtue of the fact that they are associated with an Ivy League institution, they have more educational privilege than I have, even with years in my field, in some cases. And so watching them through this lens says one thing and one thing only to me. I went all the way around the world to get back to this point. We all, as black people, struggle with the same identity politics sometimes, if we think enough about them. If we choose to be awake and aware, no matter what socioeconomic level you're at, no matter what educational level you're at, we all struggle with the same identity politics. And sometimes, and for some people, the fight no longer becomes worth it. So I'm getting that feedback again, man.
I know. No. I think, I hear what you're saying, and a couple things and that stands out to me, and why I think it's so relevant to today's students is that, again, we get back to identity. We've become a society that's so obsessed with labels, realizing that the more labels we develop, the more we dividing each other. You got the woke and the unwoke. You got the hoteps and the non-hoteps. Why can't we just be people?
Yo, that hotep episode took me out though, dog.
Exactly. You know what? And the thing is, she was having this beautiful love affair until she classified him as a hotep, and she was like, "Oh hell no!" Nah. And it went all downhill from there.
But yo, homie was out of line though. Like I used to be a hotep, so I can't. I laughed so hard that episode because I always joke around and say I'm a hotep in recovery. You know what I'm saying, or a recovering hotep. So I joke about that all the time.
Yeah, and you know what? And see, the thing is, like, even on his end, he was so steeped in his own label that he never got a chance to saw the other black kids for what they were. He was just looking for biased research to support his initial thoughts and claims. And again, the community are divided. It was like de facto segregation. He never even went over there until she pushed him over there and had him come. So That
Yeah,
labels
and there was another aspect to that I noticed is that, you know, in his belief that those guys in Armstrong Parker thought that they were better than everybody, he had developed his own superiority complex, and that's one thing I noticed about the quote unquote woke community sometimes is that they have developed this superiority complex as it relates to folks who they don't consider as woke. You know,
Exactly.
and that bothers me more than anything, primarily because I remember when some of these quote unquote woke folks weren't woke, when they were ignorant. You know, I'm like, dude, I remember when you told me that, you know, you ain't care about these, you know, black issues and yada yada yada. Now you so woke, and now everybody else is a sheep, man. You know, bro, I've been doing this a long time. You know,
and that's why, again, it goes back to, like, you know, and I'm glad you said that. You kind of beat me to my point, but the privilege that we're in, I was taught that it is my responsibility to take my privilege to empower others.
Right.
Because now I have a platform that others do not have. So I have to find a way to shine a light on the muted voices. I have to find a way to bring people to the table and in the room that are normally not in the room when decisions are being made. I have to be the person that asks the question, hey, I'm glad that we all here, but who's not at this table that should be at this table, and get people to start thinking critically on how do we build community instead of just developing solutions where people can just choose to participate in or not. And we don't care whether it's beneficial. We're just saying we're doing some type of charity. And I tell people over and over again is that charity work isn't social justice work. And it never will be. So just because you come out and you pass a couple sandwiches out to the homeless don't mean you're fixing homelessness. You just pass the sandwiches out.
You just fed them for a day.
The other thing is that education is political, and education is also about socialization. So we go back to this piece on identity. When you're being educated, like you and I, we're looking for someone who looks like us, who's older, who can tell us this is what you're going through. This is what you're expected to get out of it, and they're here to guide you along the way to make sure you get to this level. And undergrad is kind of a grab bag, you know, especially if you're at a white institution. You're looking for somebody that look like you. If they're not in your department, you're going to gravitate into other departments, and you may find somebody that look like you, but they may not understand exactly what you're going through or your experience. And if they do, you know, it's only so far that they can take you.
Right.
That socialization piece is, like in Dear White People, it's what's missing. And I think that's what that whole fantasy is like. Can we find some black elites that have been through this, who've gone through this struggle, and they're gonna tap me and tell me I'm special, and they're gonna guide me through the rest of my years in college, and they're gonna make me this next generation soldier or a leader or what have you. We have a responsibility as black people is to build community, and we have to use our intelligentsia to do so. We have to make it a point to not be so disconnected. So when we take what we have to go back into where we came from and build up. You know, that's what they've done prior to us. And I think that, again, our students, our kids don't understand that because of the gap. No one has ever modeled it for them. But also, the enemy that they're fighting now doesn't look like the enemy that we grew up fighting or that our grandfathers grew up fighting.
I think it looks a lot like the enemy that our grandfathers grew up fighting. It's just evolved.
So it's evolved into, and when I mean it doesn't look like it, is because right when you have somebody in your face, you know, one thing I think Sam said, she was like, about the guy who was like trolling her. She was like, I'm glad that I know now, so I know that he's a racist. And there's a frustration with Sam is like she's almost in her own prison and she can't be vulnerable, which is a part of growth. You have to be able to be vulnerable in order to grow and out of these uncomfortable spaces, not only to admit that you don't know the answers, but to admit that when you need help. And that's the part, again, that growth, and that you realize that you are a limited resource. So in her being able to have this, she's having this moment, she's getting burnt out because she's suspecting everybody around her could possibly be an agent that's trolling her. These microaggressions that these black kids are feeling, all of us are feeling. That microaggression when you can't get a business loan, and the certain code of language that's been thrown at you, the dog whistle politics that we're experiencing right now. Um, so there's tons of frustration that's mounting on people, and if you don't have a way to internalize that, a way to interpret that, the way to speak out on it, that frustration can just build up, and to a point you can just collapse under the weight. So that's why it's so important that we need those communal connections. We need somebody who's been there to come back and say, look, this is what you're feeling.
Far too often we get our own stuff and we don't reach back.
Exactly. and that's one of the reasons why I came back to the city. I could have went to North Carolina. Oh, I would have loved to have been in North Carolina. But I got to come back to Alabama because I got to go where there's a need.
I'm going to tell you now, I'm going to be a hypocrite because I ain't coming back.
I know, man.
Be a hypocrite. I ain't coming back. I am not coming back. I'm just letting you know now.
Yeah.
So okay, we talked about frustration for a little bit. So let's really get into the frustration and truly what This Is America speaks to. I mean, this is America. So let's start with the beginning of the week when a few black women were leaving an Airbnb that they'd had in Cali, and they were loading up their car. And as they were loading up their car, apparently, Darth Karen, decided to wave at them. And I don't know whether they didn't see him or just didn't feel the need to wave back or didn't want to wave back, but they didn't wave back. So because they didn't wave back, they called the police. This Darth Karen, goes and calls the police on them. And the police response to black women taking luggage out of an Airbnb has a police helicopter, and I think they said, 7 police cars?
Yeah.
Yeah, 7 cop cars and a helicopter tracking them because they were vacating their Airbnb. And what made it so bad was that the owner of the Airbnb that they rented at, they just put money in this woman's pocket. She said, well, if they had just waved back, they wouldn't have had to deal with that. Ma'am, if your neighbor hadn't called the cops because her feelings were hurt, she wouldn't have had to deal with that. So then from there, we have, it's just another story that I really don't want to skip, but we got to skip. Then we got graduating while black. And that happened at the University of Florida, where apparently there was an overzealous usher that decided to put his hands on people as they were graduating if they took too long or if they did their traditional hop or whatever for their fraternity or sorority or whatnot. Now, people was like, well, they need to be more dignified. And okay, whatever. But the moment you put your hands on me, I don't care if I stood up there and farted on the mic. Don't put your hands on me. Because the moment you put your hands on me, I'm going to consider that a battery and I'm going to defend myself. So we had the graduating while black, where the guys were forcefully ushered off stage. Then we had sleeping while black at an Ivy League institution, Yale, where Lolade, I'm not going to butcher her last name because I got too much respect for my ancestors for that. But this young lady named Lola, who's a grad student at Yale, she had fallen asleep in one of the common study rooms, and Sarah Brash, whose name has been blasted all over social media now, decided to call the cops on her, and this is not the first time she'd called the cops. And of course, the internet is undefeated. They tracked down her history, and somehow she was a feminist that wanted to study. She's getting a philosophy degree. She already has a degree. She already has a law degree and another master's degree, but she's getting a PhD in philosophy or something. And she wants to see she's writing about and studying the subhuman levels at which women are viewed by the legal system, which is so strange that she now calls the police on a black woman. And that black woman then has to justify her right to even exist in that space. Oh, that video made me so mad. Then we have paying rent while black. There was this couple in St. Louis, Missouri, where they tried to get a money order for $1,100 from a certain grocery store. And the guy said, hey, you can't use a debit card. We've been dealing with fraud lately. Understandable. You know, they've got these green dot cards out here where people are you doing that fraud. So the guy said, okay, you know what? Don't worry about it. My girl will be here soon with cash. They wouldn't even accept her cash for this same $1,100 money order. Now, paying rent while black really shouldn't be a thing. But what annoyed me about their video was that this lady said, you guys look like really, really good people, really, really nice people. Don't get yourself in trouble because they might call the cops. So I'm justifiably and righteously upset and frustrated. And you're saying I look like a good person and you don't want me to go to jail. Why don't you check the owner or the manager here and not try to silence me? It just annoyed me. So then we go from paying rent while black to barbecuing while black, which I don't know if you watched that whole long video.
Yes.
So apparently another Darth Karen comes up and she's upset because they don't have raisins in the potato salad, but also that they were apparently using a charcoal grill, minding their business. And she said that, you know, the city has to pay out money for kids that are burnt by charcoal grills. Not really sure. But then what was crazy is that at the end when the police showed up, she cried and lied and said she'd been assaulted and everything like that. This is after she harassed them and basically stole this white woman's card. Now, then we have complaining at Waffle House Part 2 while black. A young man in a city right outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, apparently had a customer complaint. And the video began, and so apparently Waffle House calls the police on this guy. And when the video begins, the cop has him in a full Nelson, like literally in a full Nelson, which means both of his arms are straight up in the air and his head is being pressed forward. And they like, and he's like, stop resisting. Well, how am I supposed to be? How can I resist when you got my arms in the air and I can't put my hands behind my back because you got my arms in the air? And so then when he lets go of the full Nelson, he grabs the kid by the throat and is choking him up against the Waffle House window. At this point, now I'm going to tell you, like, personally, you put your hands around my throat, cop or no, and this is just a natural reaction for most people. If you start choking me, I'm going to react violently. Like, I'm going to defend myself. Fight or flight is going to kick in, and I'm going to swing on you. And so this kid, apparently, this guy was 22 years old. He had just taken a 16-year-old sister to the prom. He apparently has the peace of an angel and the patience of Job. He did not react in a violent manner. And then the cop slams him on the ground, and this kid is trying to keep from having his face scraped across the pavement. And the cop is still like, stop resisting. Well, sir, can you stop trying to grind my face into the concrete? So apparently we can't complain at Waffle House about customer service while black. Then there was this other, this is all on the Kind of Sleepy Podcast Facebook page, by the way. You can't get dropped off at the airport while black. This man, Michael McGill Jr., he's a very educated man, very intelligent guy, and he's unloading his car. His mother is dropping him off at the airport. He's unloading the car, and this officer aggressively comes towards him and is telling him to get up against the wall and everything like that because apparently they weren't supposed to stop right there or something like that. You know, the cop is very, very aggressive and yells at him. And when the airport security is notified, after he made the formal complaint, they basically said there's nothing that they can do about it, which means, you know, they violate. I mean, he feels violated once again and helpless, which is how we often feel. So you can't drop off. You can't get dropped off at the airport while black. Then we got traveling while black. I mean, this has all happened in the past week. So a Southwest Airlines flight attendant put her hands on a black woman and forcibly moved her from her seat and damaged her laptop and dropped her bags. This young lady, she has an African name as well. I don't want to mess up her name. It's on our Kind of Sleepy Podcast page. And Southwest basically said that they have the right to treat her like that. And she was traveling for work, so she couldn't really make a fuss and couldn't really make a stink because she had to be there at her destination for work, and she didn't want to lose her job. And so, you can't travel while black because people will put their hands on you, and you can't give birth while black because black mothers and infants in the United States are far more likely to die than their white counterparts. We talked about this once before on the show. You can't walk with your kid while black either. Donald Sherman took a walk with his young child, kept him home. Kid was in a stroller, and he's walking down this nature trail, and this white person apparently saw this young black man pushing his kid in a stroller along the nature trail and said he looked suspicious. And so park security came up to him and said, hey, somebody just called and said you look suspicious. For what? Pushing a stroller? You gonna get assault with a deadly child? Like, I don't understand. So, people often say that the media pushes these kind of stories to divide us. But I guarantee you that at least 80% of your black friends, your black family members, your black coworkers, your black acquaintances have had law enforcement called on them, or have had to for just being there where they were supposed to be, or have had to justify or rationalize why they were somewhere that they absolutely deserve to be. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I've got stories. I know you've got stories. I mean, the reality of it is this is America, where your skin is your sin and your body is a cause for alarm, and your very presence has to be rationalized and justified. It's like, and every time it happens to me, and it's happened to me fairly often. I've been asked that question fairly often, or it's been assumed that I wasn't supposed to be somewhere, didn't have the education to be somewhere, or something like that. Every time it happens, I wouldn't dare compare it to this, but I imagine that it's a child of, or a descendant of, freed slaves being asked to keep their freedom papers on them. Mm-hmm. Or when black men back in, the 40s, like after World War I, after World War II, and even around Vietnam, had to keep their discharge papers on them to prove that they were who they said they were. Mm-hmm. And I just, dude, like, it's honestly, it is exhausting to see this, hear about this, think about this, let alone experience this. And we experience this every day. I mean, think about it, man. I know occasionally, given your level of education and given your level of intelligence, people still try to, force you to rationalize or justify why you are in some of the rooms you're in, or why you're in some of the spaces you're in.
Yeah.
How often does that happen to you?
The thing is, I probably get it maybe, I say once every 2 weeks, if that. But the thing about it doesn't just come from white people. It comes from our own as well. I'm young. I'm one of the youngest, highest ranking people in my position. So when the young dude shows up, I would like to intern, no matter how well dressed I am. And then, older people have a problem with taking orders from a younger black dude. So it happens often. I think, what you're pointing at, and I think almost a newer age of Jim Crow being, and it's all pushing through microaggressions, like this whole thing of a white anxiety over black people in public spaces. And you're constantly being asked, what are you doing here? Or being told that we don't belong here. Almost like we're being reduced back to second-class citizens, and you're watching the weaponization of white privilege.
Right.
This a person can literally cuss you, a white woman, like she was aggressive, right? Cussing, she was like, she talking real greasy, and then when the police shows up, she gives you white tears on the spot. And now she's this perfect victim, and it's all these around all these black people, and she's playing to police bias. She's playing to the color crime. She's weaponized their privilege she wants somebody to take action, so she was like, ha, I got you. You'll know next time when you see me coming and I tell you to do something, you move.
Right.
And this is what we're like. And this is no different This is a history in America. Again, this is America. Then white women lying and saying that they were raped by black men, or white women lying and saying that they were kidnapped by black men, or false testimony and like, oh, this black man whistled at this white woman and made some type of sexy, suggestive comment towards her.
Right.
It's no different. And the other thing, and I will definitely caution you to be careful about this as well, is have you heard the term swatting?
Yeah, I have.
And to me, that is scary. It is brutally scary because of us as black people. When we see symbols and language, like if someone calls and says that there's a hostage situation and there's a black man holding someone hostage and he has a gun, you're a gun owner, you're a black man, and some kid from across the country gives out your address, so a police officer shows up, or a SWAT team shows up, mad aggressive, kicking on the door, and you you chilling, and you're like, yo, what's going on? You open the door and you get confronted with aggression. Your reaction is like aggression out of confusion.
Right.
And you can easily be killed off of, again, just the accusation. And it's scary to think that we don't get the benefit of the doubt. We get interrogated as victims. Well, were you following directions? Were you doing what you was told to do? Were you in the right place? Is this some type of comeuppance or some type of karma for the past life that you were living? Just because you was in a gang in the 3rd or 4th or 5th grade or in middle school, somebody went back and found that picture, and that's the picture that they put up of you and said, oh, maybe this is something you deserve from stuff you've done in the past.
We're not allowed to be the victim of anything. We're our deaths are constantly rationalized. Our bodies being brutalized is constantly rationalized. I mean, we can never. We've gotten to the point now where we cannot lay legitimate claim to having been, wronged in any kind of way, because somebody will always find a way to rationalize or justify our treatment. It's crazy to me.
Exactly. And as a black man, I haven't had to deal with this, and I knock on wood, and I hope I don't ever have to deal with this. But when I watch these police encounters and I watch the situation that unfolded at the Waffle House, it scared me. Not because of, like the embarrassment, but is that he's constantly triggering him and hoping that he will respond, so he will have a right to take it even further. Like he's baiting him
right
over and over. And during the whole point in time, he's emasculating him. It's like I'm being stopped and asked for my freedom papers or something like that. And then I show them to you and you tear them up and you start calling me names. And then when I respond and tell you that, hey, bro, this ain't that day, this ain't that time, I'm a free black man. I have the same equal rights as you. You take me and you make me get out the car under the state's authority, slam me to the ground, put your foot in my neck, and start tussling with me.
Right.
And I'm screaming, I can't breathe. And because I'm reacting to not being able to breathe, that gives you more of an impetus to start punching me in the back, or punching me in the legs, or punching me in the head, or using a billy club and just pressing it down on the back of my neck, or applying some type of chokehold. Like, all these things are emasculating because this is happening again. Black bodies in public spaces.
It's buck breaking.
Yeah.
That's what exactly. It is. It's new age buck breaking.
Exactly. So, and going back to this video, like we talk about, this is America. Like, listen, all this is happening. The education, the politics, the social media stuff. All this is happening over the landscape of broken black bodies, and it's frightening. Because we're being reduced to second-class citizenship. And the scariest thing about that, and you're going back to the people behind the music video and the distractions we're seeing, is that we're so distracted that we can't organize. We're so distracted that we're apathetic, and we're so distracted that we don't see that dominoes are being lined up against us.
Right.
and we're so distracted, and and we're quick to wear the yellow shoes to be dancing in the midst of this chaos because we got this money, because we got this status, because we got this fame or this particular title, that we're willing to just keep going through without giving any care to what's going on. And we have, again, I don't have all the answers to this. I may have maybe one or two answers, but we have to recapture our community, and we have to start moving forth together. Because one thing I've learned, if nothing else, and if I'm taking this politically in the direction of political wing, is that Republicans may not all like each other, but when it comes time to make a move, they are lockstep with one another.
Oh yeah, they're gonna stick together because they know how to wield power. Because that's a whole other story. That's a whole other podcast, man.
And we need to, you may need to talk about that, but we need to teach each other how to wield power and how to wield power collectively.
Yeah, I mean, because we so busy trying to take the moral high ground and take the high road. Meanwhile, they steadily amassing power by pandering to the lowest common denominator. But that's a whole other story.
Even greater degree, we are miseducated to the point that we cannot be united. So, someone saying something as much as slavery was a choice, we're literally divided, having an argument over whether slavery is a choice or not. That is, to me, that is preposterous.
How was that even an argument? Anyway,
exactly.
we out of time because we out of time. We're gonna end up going a whole other hour, man. Yo, I really appreciate you coming in, man, and stepping in and talking about these heavy things with me, man. I always appreciate your perspective, man. Memorial Day weekend, what you doing, man?
Oh man, I'm chilling. You got me.
Let's kick it. Let's kick it.
Oh, definitely, man. Old time. Let's get some people together, drinks, and good conversation, brother.
All about it. All about it. Well, hey, thank you guys for tuning into the KNWLDG podcast. You can check us out on pretty much everywhere at this point. Spotify, your Apple Podcast app. You can check us out on SoundCloud, YouTube, Facebook, everywhere. We're getting bigger. And so another thing is, make sure you look out for Melanin and Merlot. That's the new podcast as part of the KNWLDG family that's coming soon. And then we have another one coming up soon, Be Gracefully Bold. That's a video podcast series, but we're going to keep that under wraps for now. We'll tell you more about that later. But thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch y'all next week. Peace.
Peace.